I'm with Adnan Musallam, who's written a new book called From Bethlehem to the United States. Now, Adnan, were you born in Bethlehem? And what was life like as a child in Bethlehem?
Yeah, you're talking about Bethlehem in 1944, about the closing years of World War II, okay? And, of course, I didn't know a lot about what was happening because I was a little child, But as I became aware what was happening around me, those years, those early years, I began to realize the big Arab-Israeli conflict, okay? And the first year that I was really became aware that there's something wrong. I was already a child and I didn't know how to analyze or anything like that. But I remember during the months when we have the Resolution 181, the partition of Palestine in two states, I remember there were many meetings in Bethlehem, many people in our house, because my father was a well-known politician. And so many people wanted to ask him what is happening and all kind of stuff. And so at least I became aware that our home was a big meeting place at that time. Later I realized that because of the partition plan, the 1947 partition plan, which eventually turned into basically a civil war between the Palestinian Arabs and the Israeli Jews, okay? That was my first, let me say, awareness. I became aware, and then I became more aware during the 1948. Then war broke out in 1948 between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And again, I became more aware that there was something horrible is happening, even though I was very small still, 1948. And I remember that early April 1948, it was the Nakba year. The Nakba year when the Palestinians, about 750,000 Palestinians, lost their homes and all what they belong and became refugees, okay? And that was also planted in as I grew up and realized what was happening. Then I grew up as a regular human being and stuff like that. But one of the biggest, I think, negative developments in my life were two big events. In 1949, it was the martyrdom of my uncle Jacob. He was with the Jordanian army and the jeep he was riding on blew up because of the minefields, stuff like that. But the most important event that took place 2 years later, 1951, was the death of my mom, Farida, and it was horrible. As I mentioned earlier, all her life she knew nothing except being pregnant, from the time she was married in 1934. And I have to say it impacted my life that my mom left us, And then 2 years later, my dad got married, okay? And there was a big, confrontation between my mom's mom, Nakhle, and my stepmother. And it's not a very good relationship. My grandmother, she was very protective of us and stuff like that. But my stepmother, I don't know whether right or wrong, but she wants to know that she also have some kind of control in the house and stuff like that. And so we lived through that contradictions between my grandmother and my stepmother, okay.
So there was conflict within the country, but also conflict within the family as well.
Of course, and death of my mom and all that stuff happening at that time, okay.
In 1948, Israel became a state, but also as well, Jordan controlled Bethlehem here.
Of course, the West Bank. Yeah, Jordan controlled the West Bank at that time and also controlled the east part of Jerusalem, okay. But the problem at that time, I remember it was poverty-stricken West Bank and East Jerusalem, and young people like myself and others were only thinking about the hell they're going to do now. Things are not going very well, and persons like me and others who were growing up in that area at that time were thinking about how they can go and leave that place and go into another place, another country and stuff like that.
Now that's happening today, isn't it? We've obviously got a war happening at the moment and people today are still wanting to leave. But even in your day, your young days, people were still wanting to leave.
Yeah. Concerning people leaving the place, we still have the big problem. And this has been a big problem in Bethlehem's history. It started in the early 20th century, people leaving into Latin America, into many places, into Australia, into many. It's horrible, And as long as the situation between the Palestinians and the Israelis, the situation is not settled down, I think this idea of immigration and leaving the country will continue to take place. It's horrible concerning the immigration.
And of course, you did leave. Where did you go? What happened to you there?
Well, so like many young people, I was thinking about how do I also leave? How do I leave the Bethlehem and leave the West Bank and I start looking for places where in the West, where I can go. And luckily, as I show it very clearly in my autobiography, that my father at that time, who was the mayor of Bethlehem, visited the States and attended an international convention for the mayors of the world in Washington, D.C. And he met many, many, many mayors, And he got also the key to the cities of many cities in the States. And he came back in 1961. To me, I don't know, at that time I became better in my English language. I continued to study the English language and stuff like that. And I seized the opportunity that my father's been in the States. And I started writing people in the States that I want to come to the States and learn and get a degree and all that stuff. And luckily, one of the people I wrote to was the mayor of Wabash, Indiana. And the mayor of Wabash, Indiana was also a member of the Rotary Club in Wabash, Indiana. And it looks like he talked to the Wabash Club about bringing a student from Jordan. That's what he's called, from Jordan. And then they arranged so I can spend 2 months and a half with each family, 5 families. And that's it. They made the program, they made all the budget for the trip and stuff like that. And they also, they financed my trip to the United States through Lufthansa, and everything went very nicely. I realized that my dad, even though he was the mayor of Bethlehem, but financially he just could not afford. He couldn't afford all the expenses. Luckily, in the first year I was in the States, the families I lived with, the great, beautiful families I lived with in the States, they treated me as one of their children. And so they never left me. Whatever I want to, they bought me and stuff like that. So I was lucky from that. And so I was able to spend 1962-63 with these people there in Wabash, Indiana. Really great time. I can never forget how these people were nice to me and stuff like that, including the guy that really helped me greatly was the mayor of Wabash, Robert Mitten. He really helped me greatly.
So you were in the States in the 1960s. Of course, in 1963, November the 22nd was when JFK was assassinated. Do you remember that day?
Yeah, of course. Now, I finished my high school diploma in June or July 1963, and then immediately I was thinking about not going back home. I don't want to go back home. So the people in Wabash were very nice to me, especially the mayor of Wabash. So I decided to go to one of the best institutions in the United States at that time, which is Indiana University. And so luckily, I was admitted to Indiana University, as an in-state student, and really that really was a great help. And there was a lady, Mom Field, who visited Bethlehem also, and who had a great relationship with my family also, and my grandmother. And she lived in Bloomington, Indiana, And she said, yes, you can come, and I have an apartment in the basement, and you can have it, and stuff like that. So I had all kind of support. Now, in 1963, in the fall, it was my first year attending the university. I remember I was at the Union Building. The Union Building, that's where all the students meet after classes and stuff like that. They drink coffee and stuff like that. And I was, as the rest of the students, I went there to the common, okay? And I think I was sitting down, as I remember, and I don't know exactly what I was doing, but the thing for sure, I start hearing people weeping. And I didn't know why would people start weeping, you know. And it was an emotional moment, you know, because President Kennedy was well-liked by everybody. Many people had high hopes in him and stuff like that. And I moved to the other room, or the TV room, with the news. And then I found out that President Kennedy was assassinated. He was assassinated. It was a big tragedy for the American people at that time. And then Walter Cronkite came out. And of course, this is the first time I got to know who is Walter Cronkite, who became a very famous broadcaster at that time. But it was a big tragedy for the American people to have, when you're a very fine president, to be assassinated. Okay. And I saw that with my own eyes, how the people were reacted to that assassination. In the common building at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. Yes, I saw that. I saw people crying. You
graduated from there. What happened after you graduated university?
It was in 1967. I was graduated political science, or what you call their government. And at that time, war broke out. The Six-Day War broke out. And I just couldn't come back home. I can't. So what I did at that time is that my sister, Nawal, she was married to a Bethlehem people, Rock family, and then they lived in Honduras. So what I did, right now when I'm thinking about that, I don't remember how I went to Honduras, which way I went to Honduras, but I know I went to visit my sister because I needed somebody. I needed somebody to be with, my sister, you know. And so I went there, and she had very small kids at that time, Jean-Pierre, Jacqueline, about maybe 4 or 5 kids. And I went to visit them in the summer of 1967, okay? That was, I think, one of the nice things I did at that time, because it would be difficult to be by myself, okay? So the war of 1967, I was in Honduras. And then a month later, you know, I went back to the States, and then I continued my degrees, Master of Arts, for another 2 years. And I just was determined to finish my degrees and study and stuff like that at a good university. That was another stage of my life, another stage where eventually I got to know my American wife, Martha, and we got married in a Methodist church in Menton, Indiana. And this also being married and then having eventually a child, you know, that caused many responsibilities on my head. So I was forced to take a full-time job, okay? Full-time job at the university, working from 11 p.m. until 7 a.m. in the morning, you know. It was difficult, but I had to work. I have to provide in order to support the family, you know, stuff like that. But I continued to also continue for my degrees. And then I started another degree in journalism, you know, which I didn't finish actually, and stuff like that. And I don't know, we went through a troublesome period, 1970, like this, 72, 73, troublesome period. I wasn't happy at all. And we moved from Indiana to Michigan, where my cousins lived, you know. And by the way, during many times when I also had to depend on myself, I worked for Chrysler Corporation also. I worked for Chrysler Corporation in the summer of 1965 and the summer of 1966. You know, all these to help me being able to finish schooling and stuff like that. So I was very good about that. Now in Michigan, again, Chrysler took me to work for a few weeks there. And at that time, I just felt like I need to do something else in my life. Okay, my marital life was not going very good. What I did completely changed my whole things in my life. So I decided to join the U.S. Navy. Wow. Even though swimming was not my favorite. Yeah, and so I joined the U.S. Navy. And first of all, I was a seaman, which is fine. I was in a ship, of course, and have all kind of experiences aboard the ship, And then the captain of the ship realized that this guy with us now, he had too many degrees. He has a BA and he has an MA. What the hell is he doing in the ship? He wanted to know what I was doing in the ship. And so this guy, bless his heart, I tell you what, he started contacting the people in Washington. He said, what you guys sending me this guy? And eventually, a year later, joining the Navy, I got another order to go to another place in the Navy and to work more with intelligence, okay? Which is very nice, about biography mostly. Biography of Muslim people visiting, coming from different parts of the world. And so our division was to know who are these people, biography of these people, and be ready in case anybody asked for them. So I worked with them, most of them officers and stuff like that. I think I could have stayed in the Navy and become an officer there. But then I was thinking about, I need to really further my education. BA and MA is not enough. One of the officers in the Navy, a doctor, he was impressed. He was very impressed with my tasks in the Navy and stuff like that. And he was in good contact with the people in Michigan, the University of Michigan. And he started writing them and telling them about me, my background and all that stuff. And that made it easy for me to apply for a doctorate at the University of Michigan. Okay? Wow. And that's when I joined the history, Near East studies and all that stuff at the University of Michigan. That's when all this comes out at the end of that. Okay?
And that's your other book. What's it called?
It's concerning radical Islam. It's really basically about radical Islam. Now, when I was at the University of Michigan, one of my big advisors there was Professor Mitchell. He was originally from Lebanon, but he's been in the States for a long time, and he was a full professor, and he was my advisor, and he was a historian. And we're talking about what kind of topic would I like to concentrate on for my dissertation, and we talked about that a lot. And one of the guys that I was impressed to really focus on was a guy by the name of Sayyid Qutb, okay, of Egypt. Sayyid Qutb, okay, he was a very controversial writer. And so I wanted to know more about Sayyid Qutb, and especially about the transformation in his life, okay, transformations, because he was not a radical Islamist all the time. No, he was more secular person, stuff like that. So I wanted to know in detail what was happening in his life. And to my credit, most of those people that dealt with Sayyid Qutb were Muslims. Okay? And for a change, here's a Christian who wants to write about Sayyid Qutb. Okay? And to write about Sayyid Qutb in a very objective way, the pluses, the minuses of Sayyid Qutb, okay? Because you have to be very careful. Sayyid Qutb, to many people, he's a Satan. But I don't know, I didn't see that. He changed, okay, he changed. And I blamed President Nasser of Egypt. I said, okay, this guy was radical Islamist. Okay, and you believe that he was involved in some kind of controversy about overthrowing you. But why do you have to kill him? Why do you have to kill Sayyid Qutb? Even though you are in 1965-66, Abdel Nasser, was very strong. He was very strong position and stuff like that. But instead, he decided he wants to get rid of Sayyid Qutb. And by getting rid of Sayyid Qutb, he created martyr for all the Islamic movements. That's how Sayyid Qutb became. So my job is to talk first of all about Egypt, what was happening in Egypt at that time, and then the majority of the study about step by step about the life and thought of Sayyid Qutb. Okay? And through the transformation in his life and thought. So the word transformation is very important because it's to show you how this guy changed from a secular-oriented person to a radical Islamist. So that's what I tried to show in my study.
Now, after your studies and after the Navy and all these studies that you were doing, you eventually came back to Bethlehem? Why did you want to come back to Bethlehem?
I came back to Bethlehem, and I was very anxious about coming back to Bethlehem. But remember, I left Bethlehem in 1962. And now by the time I was finishing with my dissertation, it was 1983. Okay, so many, many years, and I just want to come back to Bethlehem. And I was already writing about Bethlehem, about the press in Bethlehem. So I wanted Bethlehem. And at that time, the president of Bethlehem University, the vice chancellor, wanted new people who got their PhDs and stuff like that to come back to Bethlehem. And here I am. I want to come back to Bethlehem, even though I don't think until now my family, I don't think they think it was a good idea.
So we see 40 years from the 80s till now, 2025. Have you seen much change in Bethlehem over those years, particularly with the political scene?
Many changes, of course. Many changes, especially now that artificial intelligence is going into the way now. And I don't know, I think about Bethlehem in the 80s and Bethlehem now. It's very difficult for me to generalize.
You could go to Jerusalem in the 1980s, could you?
It's very difficult to go to Jerusalem, you know.
Then?
Remember, let me tell you now, back in 1984, a small example, at 2 o'clock in the morning, my wife was in labor, okay? And that was, we're talking about 1984, the birth of my second daughter, Gina, who is in Denmark now. Okay, so when I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning, I got her into the car and I drove to Jerusalem. And nobody was telling me where to go. I was straight to Jerusalem, straight. There is nothing in the way, you know. I kept going to Jerusalem. I took my wife to Jerusalem. At that time, there was nothing like these days. Now, we can't go now too. It's very difficult. But to tell you how things change a lot, okay?
Yeah, I've seen it even in my day living here, how things have changed, where there was sort of a temporary checkpoint and then it became more of a permanent checkpoint and then a wall got built round and now you need permissions to go to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
But in 1996, I came into Jerusalem with Israelis and we had Palestinians coming into Jerusalem. So it's changed a lot, hasn't it?
Yeah, things have changed a lot. And I hope, I don't know when, but I hope, maybe I am naive to a certain extent. I really want to see the Israelis and the Palestinians to sit down and talk and get over all these pains they've been going through. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. But this is my dream. I want that to happen. But I see now the problem with I don't know. I think the Palestinians are going to find out many of them want peace.
Are the ones that are wanting peace also the ones that are wanting to leave?
Yeah. This is the problem now. We don't know exactly the present politicians, Israeli politicians, what they want. We don't know. And that's what makes it difficult right now.
So your book is called From Bethlehem to the United States, A Christian Palestinian American's Journey. Where can people get a hold of this book?
You can get hold of this book through Amazon and other companies. They'll find them there.
Okay, Adnan, well, thank you very much for sharing today.
Yeah. Let me give you a copy of this, okay?
Thank you.